The CDC is considering whether all U.S. adults should have access to COVID booster shots. Earlier today, the FDA authorized Moderna and Pfizer boosters to anyone 18 or older who is at least 6 months past their last dose. The U.S. reported nearly 108,000 new cases on Thursday, bringing the 7-day average to more than 88,000. Officials say northern states are being hit the hardest because cold weather is forcing more people to gather indoors. Joining us with more now is CBS News researcher and reporter Max Baer. Hi, Max. Great to see you. So as we mentioned, boosters do still need the CDC's stamp of approval before these boosters are made widely available. What will the agency take into consideration for approval?
Well, the agency will take into consideration the rising rates of infection and hospitalization among the vaccinated, the fully vaccinated. And they'll also be taking into consideration the fact that we're looking at, I believe it's roughly 10 states that have already expanded their own recommendations to their residents to get the booster if they're an adult who's been fully vaccinated. So you already have states kind of acting on their own to make this recommendation. And I think that applies pressure to the CDC to make a clinical recommendation that adheres to that, just so that there isn't patchwork policy around the country and that there isn't further confusion about which groups fall into an eligible risk category. And I think given the surge in cases, which is also something that they'll consider, which is that cases are up some 35% in the last few weeks, that there's a need to allow all adults to get a booster shot if they decide that that's the best decision for them.
And it's interesting that this window now, in terms of what the FDA has approved, is 6 months out. Earlier, when we'd been discussing the possibility of boosters, the timeline was more like 7 or 8 months out. Why is it shortened?
It's shortened because I think at 6 months you start to see immunity wane, particularly amongst older populations. So again, for the sake of simplicity, I think health officials are wanting to open up eligibility at the earliest possible sign when we could see immunity wane instead of the latter, which would be, kind of waiting until maybe immunity wanes more significantly.
Right.
You're also seeing a bit of a difference in terms of when immunity starts to wane between the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. It's, because, and this is still under speculation, but I think some health officials have considered, since there's a smaller time period between the first and second doses of the Pfizer vaccine, that maybe that contributes to the speed at which initial immunity begins to wane after being fully vaccinated. So again, for the sake of simplicity, and instead of having to have a different time period for the Moderna versus the Pfizer, just allowing eligibility to open at the earliest possible sign when health officials have seen immunity starts to wane.
And again, Max, to clear stuff up for folks who are, getting ready to schedule that booster, like myself, I actually have already scheduled my booster. It really doesn't matter whether you have your booster be Moderna or Pfizer, correct? Or should you try, if you have the option, to keep all 3 shots the same?
Well, there's certainly there's been no indication that there's a specific health risk to getting a different one of the boosters. I think really the significance from a booster standpoint is in terms of whether you were initially vaccinated with J&J, at which point I think the data from the NIH, which studied mixing and matching of booster doses, found that there was a very significant increase in immune response and antibody levels amongst people who received a J&J shot and then received either the Pfizer or Moderna as a booster. I believe the highest boost was in people who received Moderna. But if you were initially vaccinated with the mRNA vaccines, again, there's no safety risk to getting a Pfizer booster or Moderna booster. So I would say, I think, go with whatever you elect and choose, given that there's no safety risk to that. And there also isn't shown to be a significant difference in immune response if you were initially vaccinated with an mRNA vaccine and get a booster of an mRNA vaccine.
Right. No, that makes sense. So, Max, even if boosters are approved by the CDC today, there's going to be a rush. I know that here in New York, if you try to go to the CVS and get an appointment, it's really hard. So not everyone is going to be able to get one before Thanksgiving, before the holidays. So what should people consider before heading to their holiday destination?
Well, what I would consider is, first of all, the best case scenario would be to have a Thanksgiving of all people who are fully vaccinated. If you're having a Thanksgiving dinner with people who are both vaccinated and unvaccinated, just aside from boosters, you're increasing the risk for the people who are not vaccinated of potentially getting infected. But boosters aside, I think I would take a careful consideration about maybe older people in your family if they haven't gotten boosters, just given what we're seeing in terms of case trends, and be aware of what infection trends look like in your given county, in your given community, because that's going to affect the potential risk to infection to people who are unvaccinated or maybe older populations who are not getting a booster. What we are still seeing is that the risk of infection wanes amongst kind of the younger adult populations, but the risk of hospitalization and death still remains more heavily in those older populations. So that's something I would take into account in case, say, people who are maybe in a younger demographic of your family haven't gotten a booster. That may mean less in terms of a risk of a severe illness, but potentially a risk of infection.
All right. Well, Max Bayer, thank you so much. Great advice. Great to see you.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good day.